Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks for joining us. Well, there were two reports this week about legal issues going unpursued by authorities. One had to do with instances of rape. The other involved traffic court. We'll look at both and ask why. We will also look at the latest on the Senate runoff, as well as the levee lawsuit, mired in politics, and UNO facing curriculum cuts. Our Future Watch segment examines plans for the airport's new terminal. At the gate for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Mike Perlstein, investigative reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4. Don Ostrom, our Future Watch reporter. And Stephanie Grace, columnist, The New Orleans Advocate. First over to Mike, and the Inspector General of Orleans, New Orleans Inspector General, issued a really scathing report about the sex crimes unit at NOPD and the lack of rape investigation, accusation investigations.
Yeah, this one was bad. I can think of the times I've been on this show talking about New Orleans police officers behaving badly. Len Davis, and during Katrina, the Danziger Bridge, Henry Glover. And I got to tell you, this one ranks right up there. The basic findings of the Inspector General was that looking at 5 detectives over a 3-year period, some 1,300 cases, only 14% of them actually got a thorough investigation, initial report and a supplemental report to lead to criminal charges. A full 65% were just written off as miscellaneous. And the Inspector General, Howard Schwartz, the Assistant Inspector General, took this investigation himself personally and looked through the actual case files. And he found just shocking instances of either physical or sexual abuse, sometimes involving child victims, a toddler with a sexually transmitted disease, all written up as miscellaneous, no follow-up. This is one that, unfortunately for the NOPD, has made national news in all the wrong ways. And it's bad on multiple levels. One, you have victims who got no justice. They didn't even get an investigation. The people that you call to protect and serve dropped the ball miserably. 2, it also looks at, it exposes the leadership. The commanders of these detectives were somehow, overseeing and signing off on, more than 80% of these calls coming in just being discarded.
Now, with some of these reports, there were reports filed by healthcare providers at the ER or the
Absolutely.
The special nurse unit.
Yeah, they found just a myriad of ways in which these cases were either swept under the rug, neglected, ignored, and in some cases, it was alarming how much evidence was there and available. Positive rape kits never sent to the crime lab in LSU, the State Police Crime Lab. And in some cases, the report falsely being marked as the, rape kit sent, no results.
And also reports, some of them looking like perhaps they were backdated. That is, all of this is being investigated,
Right.
We should say.
And
that's further investigation into it.
That's a whole different level of this investigation, which will now be taken up by the Public Integrity Bureau, possibly other law enforcement agencies. Because what you had was in 6 instances, when the Inspector General started asking questions and asking why is there no supplemental report in these cases in which there was clear and convincing probable cause, why no supplemental report? Well, sure enough, supplemental reports were dashed off and backdated by 2 different detectives all on the same day. Wow. So that's going to be problematic, and the police chief, Michael Harrison, already stated that they will review all of the findings and refer this for criminal prosecution if necessary.
Now, the NOPD had moved some of these detectives, even before the report was released,
That's
to
correct.
patrol, but then they have since even changed that.
Yeah, recall that under Police Chief Surpass, the sex crimes unit was problematic, and it was a very weak rate of accepted cases and cases being forwarded to the DA for prosecution. And he stepped in and he removed the commander. He took a couple detectives out of the unit, including a couple that were named here. Right now, all 5 named in the report have been not just moved to patrol duties, but now reassigned to desk duty, pending the results of a pretty serious public integrity investigation.
That's standard procedure, right?
Right. But what happens, you can be moved to patrol duty if, let's say, you've dropped the ball as a detective. You go to desk duty when there's a possibility of even more serious charges, including criminal charges. In this case, Police Chief Harrison mentioned that injuring public records and malfeasance would be 2 of those charges on the table.
And this started off as a downgrading investigation, right? Kind of a more standard.
Well, let me tell you that what struck the Inspector General's office was the fact that for the amount of crime in New Orleans, the number of reported rapes on the Unified Crime Reports reported to the FBI was 1/5 of the national average. So somehow, in a city that unfortunately has one of the highest per capita murder rates in the country, bad rate of armed robberies and shootings, our rape stats were one of the lowest in the country.
Yeah.
And they flagged that as, there must be something behind this. Now, sexual assaults are already woefully underreported by victims who are embarrassed or afraid to go to police for whatever reason. And in some cases, experts have said that, maybe a full 75% of actual victims don't ever go to the police. So in this case, those who went to the police got no investigation.
And Mike, you did mention the 3-year-old child. There were other children too, so there is concern about these children and their environments. What kind of situations were they left in? So what's happened with that?
I mean, there were children with skull fractures, both fresh skull fractures and old skull fractures. And in the midst of this investigation, the Inspector General went to PIB and went to the police and to social service agencies, said, this cannot wait until the publication of this report. We have to take action now. Kids may be in danger. And all of those children were either removed or put in some other environment deemed safe.
Is this police officer laziness at its worst, or?
Well, they're going to get to the bottom of that. Now, Public Integrity will have the ability to bring these officers in and get their explanations. What is really going to be interesting is, where were the commanders signing off on these reports? This extremely low level of, actual cases being made from all of these complaints. And I think that in the end, some commanders are going to really be on the hot seat in this.
Who's manning the sex crimes unit now that they've lost 5 detectives? And
Well,
filled it in?
that is to be announced by Chief Harrison. He moved the 5 out immediately. And again, some of the people there are new since the problem was recognized within the department. Now, with this report, look for some pretty major overhaul.
All right, Mike, thanks. So now can we moving over to Stephanie right now, and we've got runoff for U.S. Senate going on, and the Republicans had a big meeting this week.
They did, ironically, at a bar called Huey's in Baton Rouge, named for Huey Long, of course, and there was a lot of chit-chat about the irony of that. And one thing Bill Cassidy, the Republican candidate, did note was that Huey Long was the last person to beat a sitting senator in Louisiana, and he plans to be the next. He hopes to be the next. But it was, this was really, they called it a unity rally, and again, the Republicans in the state are often unified because you have a lot of factions. They're really the dominant party, so a lot of the political fighting that happens within the Republican Party. One thing that was interesting to a lot of political observers is that we had David Vitter and Bobby Jindal on the same stage.
At opposite ends.
At opposite ends. They immediately went their separate ways, but it was a small stage. And there was one, the issues that divide them do come up. Rob Maness, who was there, did he get a warm welcome after refusing to get out, even though the Republicans wanted him to get out of this race. Instead, this is the Tea Party candidate, and he got 14%. Bill Cassidy wants those 14%, so he was greeted with open arms. He gave the longest speech. He gave the best speech, frankly. A lot of this was really showing that the kind of right flank of the Republican Party is now firmly with Cassidy. They brought in Rand Paul, the kind of Tea Party possible presidential candidate. It was interesting to see him next to Jindal too, but on behalf of Cassidy. And really the whole party's coming together. Sarah Palin's coming in this weekend. Maness actually got to announce that because she had supported him. Mitt Romney, on my way in here, I got an email saying Mitt Romney needs me to support Bill Cassidy, and Ted Cruz is on board. Everybody's on board. That's the message. But even within that, you have Rob Maness brought up Common Core, for example, which has really become the issue that has divided Republicans, real kind of Tea Party Republicans versus establishment Republicans. And as soon as he said that, everybody kind of looked behind to see how people would react. And there was Bobby Jindal, an opponent, applauding enthusiastically, and there was David Vitter just kind of standing there with this very pursed smile.
Now, Stephanie, isn't it true that Louisiana voters still have a populist streak rather than vote people instead of party? That maybe it's too early to count Mary Landrieu out.
The Marylander people would like you to think that. It may be true. This was such a partisan election. It's really hard to see how she changes that at this point. But boy, is she trying.
The party politics matter so much less now that control of the Senate's been decided.
What they're saying is, let's finish this off, Louisiana. We're tired of being elected by somebody that doesn't share our values. I don't know that energy has really dissipated. I don't sense that it has. Again, this is a sitting senator with quite a good record of delivering for the state, who got 42% of the vote. This
is also a red state that went for Barack Obama 6 years ago.
This state? No, it did not.
No, 6 years ago.
Oh, it went for Mary Landrieu 6 years ago. Yes, when she was Barack Obama, she way outperformed Barack Obama. But 6 years ago, she got 33% of the white vote. She only got 18% of the white vote in this election. That's how much this has changed.
Speaking of Barack Obama, any plans for him to come here? Because Cassidy said that he would add a debate anytime.
Of course, Mary Landrieu would like to debate constantly. They're actually debating sort of up in this Congress. We can talk about that in a minute. But they've agreed to one debate. Cassidy's agreeing to one debate, and he said, well, for every time Mary Landrieu brings in Barack Obama, I will debate once more.
Okay, we're really over in the segment, but I want you to quickly mention pipeline.
Pipeline. Okay, so Mary Landrieu, one of the things she's trying to do is really double down on an argument she made throughout the campaign, which is that she is a friend of the oil and gas industry. So what she's done is she's gone and it seems like secured a vote in the Senate on the Keystone Pipeline, which enabled Bill Cassidy over in the House to say, well, I'll get that done in the House. And of course, the House Republicans support it. So what the Senate
passed it today.
They did, and the Senate votes next week. So what the Senate will eventually vote on, that Mary Landrieu is pushing, is the Cassidy bill.
It's Cassidy bill.
And the whole national political press is all over this.
Kind of an unusual situation. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Errol, over to you. University of New Orleans going through some changes.
Yeah, speaking of politics, there was a committee, a faculty committee, to make recommendations of programs to either be cut totally, to be restructured, or to be saved. We got the most attention with the ones to be cut totally. There were three. There were two of them that dealt with early education. And one that was most striking, personally kind of hits closer to home, because I came from there, was the political science graduate program. And that program, because of political science, tended to be got a little bit more notoriety because political scientists, are pollsters and commentators. So Ed Renwick, for example, came out of the UNO political science program. I mean, he was brought here before going to Loyola. Susan Howell, Ed Chervenak, people you hear doing the polling. And so they recommended that of all the PhD programs, they only had one that they recommended be dropped, and it is political science. And it had a fairly distinguished reputation at its time. But on the other side, where the emphasis is a lot of emphasis on the tourism related programs, a lot of emphasis on the movie related programs, and that's what they see where the demand is for the students. Right. And of course there's this middle area of programs like history that is so we need history, but let's move it around and shuffle it around a little bit. I do know that I talked to, off the record, to a department head a few months ago who felt that his department was going to be saved, and he was anxious for these cuts because he says, once we get rid of the deadwood, then we can and then we can start putting some more resources. So what we had during the week was a recommendation. Next, it's up to the president of Peter Foss to decide to sign off on them, and then it goes to the ULL system.
How soon do you think we would see changes happen? Would it be for next
I would think by
term?
Next year, they have to be implemented because it's, UNO is hurting. It's lost a lot of students, and so the quicker they can do the reorganizing, the better.
All right, Errol, thanks. Going over to Dawn now for our Future Watch report, and we're getting a new terminal at the airport.
We talk a lot on this show about the things that are happening for the 300th birthday of the city, all by 2018, and a lot of them seem to maybe not be happening. For instance, the World Trade Center being redone, and the convention center by the power plant end becoming something new and big. The new terminal looks like it's actually going to happen, and by May of 2018, when the city turns 300 years old, groundbreaking is expected to happen next year. The new terminal will open in May 2018. This is a $650 million project. It is totally separate and different from all of the renovations that happened ahead of the Super Bowl. Those were, for lack of a better expression, maybe a Band-Aid fix to get us to 2018. The airport, I'm told that the terminal, it's a 50-year-old aging infrastructure. It's operationally restrictive. It makes the cost way too high for the airlines to operate, and then the costs get passed on to the consumers, and there's not growth because of those high expenses. There are access constraints. So this new terminal is on the north side of the existing terminal. It's within the airport property, so they don't need to buy up any land. They don't need to do anything aside from a drainage study, which is already complete.
So it's toward the lake end of the terminal.
Towards the lake end of the terminal, closer to Veterans Boulevard. It's already leading to some new development or some potential development along Veterans, new hotels potentially coming in. It's a 30-gate, 2-concourse terminal that will be kind of what you see everywhere else. The schematic design is done, the environmental assessment is done, the final design is still working, and they're working. They signed a deal with a group of construction and engineering firms that are going under one banner as Hunt, Gibbs, Bow, Metro, and they will be fully responsible for the construction here. So there's a lot of change happening. There will be a new parking garage, there will be new taxi lanes, there may be a new flyover ramp off of I-10 to make it easier to get in and out of the airport. What's not known yet is what will happen with that old terminal. It will not be connected, it won't still be used. It might be used maybe for commercial flights that aren't passenger flights.
But still the new Delta concourse is really nice.
It's
they
very
built a
nice. It feels
concourse,
much more like airports in other places.
And then the parking, it seems like they've continually, any time in the airport's history, you go to the airport and they're adding to the parking facility, and so that's always been there too.
Right, and they just did the whole new rental car thing, so, you know.
Are those staying, or are those going to move over?
I believe the rental cars are staying, but I am not positive on that one.
So the parking areas, that, as Errol pointed out, we've got some parking garages. There's been additional parking garages, it seems, added all the time. Will those continue to be parking garages? Or will there be entirely new parking on the other side?
And probably a van service, probably, I guess.
New terminal, new everything.
So in this new terminal, will there be more shopping? You know, when you go to other terminals, you just have such an opportunity for shopping, eating.
This is one of Errol's, I think, favorite points to talk about. We are more a destination airport than a layover airport. So there's not as much need to have a shopping mall because people don't come here and hang out for an hour or two to board that next flight as often. We're more you end your flight here, or begin your travel here. You don't come here in the middle.
Which is really a good thing. We do want them to come here.
Just come and stay.
When you get out of the plane here, you want to go
city.
downtown. You don't want to be waiting for another
The
plane.
airport has already received $21 million in FAA grants. All the funding will come through existing airport fees and grants, and the city is not responsible for funding the $650 million it's going to cost.
That's always good, too. All right, thanks a lot, Dawn. Back over to Mike now. And you did a couple of reports about traffic court and a really big backlog of DWI cases there.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by the reaction. And this isn't, murder and robbery and rape, but DWIs. But it turns out that if you go to traffic court where these are prosecuted, that they have this enormous backlog. It's a backlog that is so large, goes back so many years, they don't even know themselves the exact number and why all those cases are sitting there in the system. A lot of those cases are so old that the violators are deceased, moved away. Many of those cases involve people who were actually convicted, never completed paying their fines or paid fines at all. But then the more troubling are the more active recent cases in which it turns out that you can get multiple DWIs. We found one instance of a person who was arrested 8 times for DWI, and in a 10-year span, none of them were prosecuted.
What happens there with a situation like that?
Well,
how does that happen?
It turns out that the answer to that is complicated. There are many places where the ball gets dropped, and it starts with if you are a DWI defendant and you skip court, there's almost no mechanism for anyone to come after you. Oftentimes there's not even a warrant issued. All right, that's a good chunk. And the city, when it flagged a bunch of these cases, found that, wow, no warrants. Of course, they scrambled then to issue the warrants. But even when warrants are issued, oftentimes it doesn't get into the police motions computer, which is if you get pulled over again, the red flag would go up. You'd be tagged as someone who has skipped court and subject to arrest. Those aren't in the police computer, and that's what leads to police pulling someone over, run them in the computer, nothing, and that person gets arrested as if it was a first offense, ticket come to court.
That's just really a pretty amazing
Yeah,
story.
it's mind-boggling. And let me tell you that traffic court has a computer system that if they had computers back in the Stone Age, with chisel and rock, then that's when
computers maybe.
There's a green screen and a dot matrix printer, and it's so weak that they probably have and they admitted they have great difficulty keeping up with these cases. So what is going to really, I think, tell the full story is there's an Inspector General audit of those 12,000 DWIs. And it was so bad that in trying to get a handle on this backlog, the Inspector General made public record requests. The traffic court could not answer the questions, could not run the system. So the Inspector General sent his own IT people to figure out traffic court system and said, oh, by the way, here's what you have.
So DWI, first offense, is a misdemeanor, right? And the city attorney is there at traffic court and prosecutes these, is that correct?
Yeah, the city attorney handles all of the traffic court violations, and 99% are just tickets, even a moving violation. You go in, agree on, usually plea bargain it down to some lesser charge and pay a fine. Even the DWIs, first and second offense, are handled by the city attorney's office. Upon third offense, it becomes a state felony that then goes to state court, Tulane and Broad, handled by the district attorney's office. Well, one of the immediate reactions of my stories was that the district attorney, Leon Canizero, said, I will put an offer on the table to take over traffic court prosecutions. Not just DWIs, but all of it. He said, I can do a better job. I have full-time staff. We can attack that backlog of DWIs. And he's pushing this very hard for selfish reasons as far as being able to collect some of the fines from DWIs, but also to help the city raise more money and to knock down this tremendous backlog of cases.
So he's saying he'd like to do this, okay, so what's the next step? How does that happen?
Okay, well he's already done this. He's put this in front of the mayor and the city council. They're in the budget cycle right now with budget hearings, and he's saying, look, take that money that would go to the city attorney's office for DWI prosecutions, give it to me. We'll either pay or hire more prosecutors to handle those cases, and he guaranteed that he would raise more money for the city and help some of his budget woes. I mean, he's also in there, hat in hand, hoping to beef up his budget as well.
Yeah.
The structure of traffic court, that is one of the judgeships where you consider the part-time judge.
Correct.
So you can still be a practicing attorney, which is popular among attorneys, so you can be practicing and still be a judge. But should this be different? I mean, should these be full-time judges who are doing nothing but work on this all the time?
They would not have enough work to do. They have 4 part-time judges, and there's virtually no work for them. 99% of these traffic violations all get pleaded out. It's almost just a ticket processing center. The areas where they are needed are DWIs, and those aren't being done. So just to show how unusual it is, not only is this the only standalone traffic court in the state of Louisiana, it's the only one in the nation.
In the nation, or in the nation, I know.
Now, study after study has shown that you could probably get by with 1 traffic court judge instead of the 4 that they have. And look for that to gain some traction. There's already a legislative committee looking at the merger of municipal and traffic court, which could or could not include the reduction of judgeships. That's yet to be seen.
And that's going to be moving through the legislature in the upcoming sessions. We need to get to Stephanie right now, so she has at least a couple of minutes to talk about the levee board lawsuit.
The lawsuit. Okay, so there was a hearing this week. This is the big levee, Southeast Flood Protection Authority East lawsuit against the 90-something oil companies. There was a hearing this week in federal court in New Orleans. Judge Nanette Jolivet Brown, who, for a little background, is a judge appointed by Barack Obama, is a former city official with Mitch Landrieu, also Mark Morial. And it was the first real hearing in the lawsuit itself. Now, you may have heard that there were other hearings in Baton Rouge. There is another lawsuit involving this issue. It's all very convoluted, it's very technical, but there is a state judge in Baton Rouge who has dealt with it because if you go back and remember, the Louisiana Oil and Gas Association sued Attorney General Buddy Caldwell over how the lawyers were hired in the first place. So that lawsuit has morphed into kind of a big consideration of the lawsuit. You also have one in federal court, which is probably the dominant one. The issues really are, can this lawsuit go forward? Should it go forward, especially in light of the fact that the legislature last year passed a law basically retroactively attempting to kill the lawsuit? And that's one of the many issues that was considered this week, and Judge Brown has not ruled yet, and she actually has another hearing scheduled for December 10th. So this was over things like, does that law mean that does that mean that the oil companies can have it dismissed? There were other issues. Is it the proper venue? Does the Army Corps of Engineers decide this? Is it the proper type of governmental agency? All sorts of things like this. This is going to be a long haul before we know.
So please keep track of these lawsuits for us about the lawsuit. Okay, Stephanie, thanks. Go on to looking ahead. Errol.
Well, grievous problem. There are a lot of people who are down on Drew Brees right now about his fumbles and interceptions, but not at that dog on Ferret Street. And this weekend, on the Constantine George has his staff wearing T-shirts that say, "I trust Drew." And people can also buy T-shirts. And so there is, at this moment as we speak, a I Trust Drew campaign developing throughout the city of New Orleans.
Okay, Errol. Mike.
Yeah, not to pick on traffic court, but it just turns out the more you look around traffic court, the more you find. And in about a week and a half, I will have a story on yet another boondoggle there in which $1 million has been spent, and the return on that has been absolutely nothing. No product whatsoever for $1 million spent. And I'll reveal that in my next story.
Okay, we will look for that.
This outbreak of cold weather is kind of like curl up with good book weather, but the library folks are hoping you'll do it outside. Tonight it's the 5th New Orleans Book Festival on the Ladder Library lawn with live music and then free books and all sorts of story readings and things tomorrow at City Park outside the Art Museum.
Thanks a lot, Don. Stephanie.
Back to UNO and the Political Science Department. Those of us who cover politics are quite fond of the UNO survey that comes out periodically. It gives us a lot of independent research, which is hard to get. That might go away if we lose political science, so I think people should keep an eye on that.
I know, I think you should keep it.
I do too.
I hope it stays. Thanks a lot, you guys, so much for being here this evening. And I just want to remind you on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday at 7 o'clock, Peggy Scott Laborde's latest documentary about the fairgrounds, New Orleans Fairgrounds Memories. Wednesday, 7 o'clock. Be sure to watch it. You'll really enjoy it. It's a great show. Thanks a lot for joining us. We'll see you next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.